All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the SERMAPod. This is the podcast for the Sports and Entertainment Risk Management Alliance. My name is Virginia Pederson. I am a lawyer in Houston, a partner in the Houston office of Meyer LLP. My practice focuses mostly on sports, entertainment, fitness, and hospitality defense. And I am excited to be back here again, hosting the SERMAPod again. It's one of my favorite things to do. Looking forward to talking with y'all a little bit about some of the interesting issues happening in the industry right now. Specifically today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the predictions market and the fact that the NFL has demanded that Kalshi and similar platforms stop offering a trade market on what they refer to as quote unquote manipulable, that's a mouthful, events. And so we have an actual expert to talk to us about that today. We're here with Professor I. Nelson Rose. Professor Rose is an internationally known scholar, author, and public speaker. He is one of the leading experts in the world on gambling and gaming law, and I think he's going to have a lot of good things to say today. Professor, would you tell us a little bit about your background and just kind of how you got here and what you're doing now?
Well, thank you, Virginia. Well, it actually started, I graduated from Harvard Law School in 1979, along with my classmate, John Roberts, he went into more politics and although he represented the American Gaming Association, when he was in private practice on the right of casinos to advertise. So he knows gambling. At the time, Harvard required a third-year paper of publishable quality, and gambling was exploding. So looking at just the dates when constitutional amendments and state statutes were passed, I realized we were entering what I call the third wave of legal gambling. Third time in American history that gambling has spread everywhere, starting with the state lottery being rediscovered. And I was involved in the 2018 U.S. Supreme Court case, which overturned the federal ban on sports betting that opened the door, just exploded. It took 50 years for the state lotteries to spread across the nation. We now have like 40 states with sports betting, with a few significant exceptions like California and Texas. And then a couple of years ago, Kalshi discovered some interesting loopholes and decided that they could take bets on future events and call it commodities trading. So I've been now writing a lot about this on my website, gamblingandthelaw.com.
Yeah, that's all interesting. And I just to talk a little bit more about these manipulable events, I mentioned this earlier, but it sounds like the NFL has sent a letter to Kalshi and to similar platforms. What's another one? Like Polymarket, that'd be a similar platform.
That's the other big one.
Right, demanding that they stop allowing trades on these events that can either be perceived as being easily manipulated or determined in advance. So I looked into this a little bit, and it seems like it includes things. These are just very high level examples that I found, but it seems like it includes things like, for example, field goals or specific player actions. It includes insider information, which would be like draft picks or injury reports. But then a little more nuanced, it seems to include things like, trading on predictions of what broadcasters will say during broadcasts and what celebrities are going to appear at games. So the way the NFL has described this publicly, the reason behind it is apparently to maintain the integrity of the game. And you know more about this than me, and so I'm going to let you talk all about it. But I have a list of just the four categories of betting topics that were included in this NFL letter to Kalshi and those platforms. Number one, those that can be easily manipulated by a single person. So I get that's like your field goal, right? I mean, is that what that would be, more or less? And specific player actions. Number two, those that are knowable in advance. So, like I said earlier, draft picks and then things like player signings. Number three, obviously, anything related to officiating. And number four, inherently objectionable topics. And that seems to be things like player injuries and fan safety, which makes sense. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, just on a side note, that apparently millions of dollars were spent on Kalshi last year on predictions for broadcasting statements and celebrity appearances. And that obviously is a little bit outside the context of your traditional sports book. But I'm interested in your opinion. It sounds like what they are trying to do here from a regulatory standpoint it's kind of within the confines of what the traditional sports book can do with those exceptions. Am I wrong about that?
No, I get my first reaction is good luck
Yeah,
to them. Um, my second is, yeah, this has kind of always been the rule. Nevada barred the sports books there from taking bets on who would win the Oscars because they figured out, hey, somebody puts the winner's name in the envelope long before it's opened on TV.
right.
Um, Probably the most ridiculous bet along those lines for the Super Bowl was who would perform uh, with during the show in the middle, right? I mean, of course they they rehearse. I mean, we
Yeah.
know who's going to be there. There was I have to confirm this, but there was apparently even a bet on a activity that had already occurred and was pre-recorded. I mean, it's crazy. The insider, first of all, Kalshi and Polymarket have always had rules on this.
Yeah.
They're making a big show now about banning insider trading because there's so much public uproar, and it's not about sports betting. It's about the literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are being won on the war in Iran.
Mm,
They
yeah.
that somebody with insider information knew the exact day that the airstrikes would begin. More than one person. They opened up accounts on Polymarket a few days later, bet won tens of millions in dollars on the exact time that the day that the airstrikes would begin. And now there's even more. I think, by the way, one thing that is not getting mentioned is that there is even a bigger problem for the futures prediction market, which is Kalshi isn't paying winners. There was a bet on that the Ayatollah, the first Ayatollah, would leave office by March 31st. People they won more than $50 million, and Kalshi won't pay, arguing that, being killed in a war isn't the same as leaving office. Um, the real
Wow.
reason, the real reason Kalshi isn't paying is these are not true markets, as
Hmm.
they argue. They say no one can bet on anything happening unless somebody bets on the same thing not happening. That is not true. They admitted, and courts have found, that Kalshi puts up its own money through a subsidiary, which, by the way, isn't necessarily illegal or wrong, except that they're pretending they're not doing that. Commodities markets do this, that there are what are called market makers.
Hmm.
When nobody else wants to buy, the market maker has to put up their own money to buy. And if nobody wants to sell, they put up their own money to sell. And there have been incidents of commodities market makers in more traditional commodities losing. I think the most I found was $300 million. But Kalshi, well, Kalshi does this through a subsidiary, probably so the subsidiary can declare bankruptcy.
Got
But
it.
so the situation, and I can give you a quick rundown on the legal situation if you want.
I do. I kind of want to pinpoint it. I want to keep it in the sports context for now.
Yeah,
Kind of, going back to the NFL discussion, this comes after months of discussions between the NFL and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, right? Which is, of
right.
course, the federal regulator of prediction markets. And then, of course, now there's this bipartisan Senate bill seeking to ban prediction markets from allowing transactions that mimic sports gambling. Am I right about that?
There's 3 bills actually that have already been entered, and even one of them at least got a Republican
Yeah.
from Utah. So yes, now they're still winning sometimes in courts.
Hmm.
Okay, but um, there are bills pending in half the states to regulate them or ban them. Governor Newsom in California banned his state employees from being involved in the futures market on anything that they have any say in. So it has become a very big deal. And of course, and actually, the NFL is behind the times. The NCAA had already come out very strongly about not allowing bets on single players. While,
Yeah.
by the way, New Jersey is contemplating allow players to bet on themselves, which is the ultimate crazy insider.
Right. That seems like some ethical issues there, but that's another podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, most game fixing used to be okay. You bribe the center in basketball, win the game, but don't beat the spread.
Right.
Right? I mean, now it's what's going to happen on the next play, or things that have no reason for there to be sports bets, like how long the Star Spangled Banner will be sung, or what will oh, by the way, the coin flip has come up, I believe, heads 7 times and tails 3 times, right?
Yeah.
The purpose of commodities trading, because they're pretending to be commodities. They're asserting that they're commodities because there's a loophole that allows them to declare themselves a commodities market. The reason we have commodities trading is that the farmer needs to know what the price of wheat will be when he sows the seeds.
Right.
The baker needs to know what the price of wheat will be when he buys them and turns it into cookies. And the risk is transferred to what are politely called speculators, which
Hmm.
is gambling. There's no doubt it's gambling. In fact, it is gambling. And the only reason it's legal is because there are federal statutes preempting all state anti-gambling laws if they are commodities traded on a regulated exchange. And
Well,
let me say one thing about the regulated exchange. The federal commission that regulates commodities is headed by the lawyer for Kalshi. That's who Trump supported. And he didn't appoint anybody else to the 5-member commission. The guy's not going to call for a quorum. And he has actually written an amicus brief in favor of Kalshi, their lawyer,
hmm.
who is now the head regulator. So, and the reason that's happening is because Donald Trump Jr. has a big investment in Polymarket and is a paid consultant to Kalshi.
How about that? Well, you kind of already answered my first real question for you, but you may be able to flesh it out a little more. Eh, Professor, at the most basic level, when you look at the Kalshi NFL contract, what makes it gambling under traditional legal definitions? Is that something you can
Well,
answer for us?
there's no doubt it's gambling. Gambling, all commodities trading is gambling. Gambling is you put up money, that's called consideration. The outcome is something outside of your control, that's chance, and you can win a valuable prize, such as money. Of course, if they're going with even further by saying games that can be rigged or bets that can be rigged and insider trading. But all the states have prohibitions on gambling such as this. There are now states that have licensed sports books, and the federal government says if you meet the criteria and you're traded on a federally regulated exchange, commodities and securities, then you're exempt from the state anti-gambling laws.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of moves into my next question for you. You have said before that the idea that it's a market doesn't make it any less gambling, right? So I guess my question for you is on, a broader scope, what do you think the courts will focus on to see past this packaging?
The ultimate, there are always two questions on big legal issues like that. First is who decides? So there are a couple of the early court cases said, we're not going to decide, go to the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. They'll decide, the one who's headed by the Kalshi lawyer. The other courts have said, no, we can decide. Then the next question is, the ultimate question, did Congress intend to legalize this type of activities when they passed the various commodities acts that exempted all commodity trading that meets the criteria from the state anti-gambling laws? And by the way, there's an easy answer. Of course they didn't. First of all, the commodities trading is regulated in the agricultural committees.
Right. It didn't exist.
Yeah, because it's the price of corn and wheat and stuff. But more importantly, every single time the federal government has to be involved with gambling, and it doesn't like it because gambling is a state issue. That's why Nevada and Utah can share a border and have completely different laws about gambling. Congress always exempts the states. When they pass the Interstate Horse Racing Act, they look to the states on whether horse racing is legal. When they pass the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, they look to the state to see what is your public policy toward gambling. And we just have a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, the PASPA decision, that said the federal government cannot tell the states what to make legal or make a crime, particularly with gambling, that Congress did not have the right to prevent states like New Jersey from legalizing sports betting. Well, right there, it's okay. Every branch of the federal government has, well, except for the Trump administration, has always said gambling is a state issue. We look to the states. And, the idea that Congress would intend to legalize sports betting over the objections of the states is crazy. In fact, what will eventually happen, the eventual outcome is that when Trump is gone, the law will return to the way it was, which is the states decide, not just because this is clearly illegal, but they have to allow Utah to not have sports betting if that's what Utah wants, and they have to allow Nevada to not have unregulated sports betting if
Right.
that's what Nevada wants.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. The Commodity Exchange Act talks about gaming, but not
Yeah.
gambling, right? So, to you, how important is that linguistic gap, and how much weight should courts actually give to it?
It's not important at all. Everybody agrees that gaming means gambling. The reason it's hasn't been fatal is that the activity, first of all, it is theoretically possible that the activity can involve gambling
Mhm.
because these are criteria that the um, commission uses to decide whether they're going to allow it. And of course, the commission is headed by the lawyer for Kalshi.
Right.
Um, but the it it the first case, one of the first cases in Nevada, the judge decided it wasn't gambling because the underlying event, a football game, was not gambling. That, of course, means that everything is not gambling unless it's the
Right.
outcome of a turn of the roulette wheel.
Literally
Um,
everything.
everything. Yeah. Other judges have said, yeah, the thing itself is gambling. We know it's gambling. You're betting, you're putting up money on an activity that is completely outside your control. Now, does that mean it can't be a commodity? Well, no, that's commodities are like that too.
Mhm.
But this one, it doesn't meet some of the other criteria. There has to be a public purpose. It has to allow the farmer and the cookie maker to hedge against major violent changes in the price of wheat. What possible reason can there be to no hedge against whether the tail flip in the Super Bowl will be heads or tail?
Right.
And the operators are have had problems coming up with a reason justifying why there is it protects anyone from betting from who wins or loses a football game.
Well, and so we've seen states spend years building these regulatory frameworks, right, for sports betting. What happens to those systems if companies can bypass and then simply by relabeling wagers as future contracts? I don't mean to veer off topic, but I'm interested in what you have to say about
Well,
that.
yeah, I think what you're asking is whether anybody regulates them or controls them, and
Exactly.
because of the federal statutes, the states can't do anything, with one possible exception. I think they can tax them and they can make it painful. But if they are truly commodities, then they are exempt from all state anti-gambling laws. Who regulates them? Well, yeah, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, which doesn't regulate. I mean, they don't do background checks like the Nevada does on sports books. Um, and yeah, there's not supposed to be insider or manipulative bets. First of all, the commission is allowing that. They're allowing who's going to be performing during the halftime show at the Super Bowl
Mhm.
after it's announced who's going to be performing,
Right.
and who's going to be with him after they've had their rehearsals. Um, they're allowing bets on individual players and parlays where the player can bet against himself that he's going to underperform
Mhm.
and then rig the bet so that his bookmaker colleagues who he owes money to can make money off of it.
Right.
Um, so they're allowing this. So clearly there's literally no regulation that I can see.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk for a second also about consumer protection. The age limits differ here. It's 18 for CFTC regulated contracts versus 21 for sports books. Does that raise any consumer protection red flags? It kind of seems
Well,
like it does.
that was part of the lawsuit in Nevada. And the
Right.
reason Nevada did, in fact, issue the federal judge blocked that it wasn't gambling. And so then the state of Nevada went to state court, and they, of course, Kalshi tried to prevent that, remove it to federal court. It's in state court, and the state court issued their stop order, basically, temporary restraining order, partly because not only is it not regulated and licensed, but they allow 18-year-olds to bet.
Right.
And, 18-year-olds, I have actually done research on the age limits for legal gambling in the United States and around the world. And without getting into the whole history, state lotteries are 18. Anything connected with a casino or looks like casinos is 21, partly because of the drinking age.
Right.
But even the state lotteries, if it's a video lottery terminal, which plays exactly like a slot machine, the age limit on that is 21. And I don't know any jurisdiction, including Indian tribes, that allow 18-year-olds to bet on sports events. There might be, but
Yeah.
it's usually,
I feel like you would know
21.
for what. You'd be the one who would know. So let me ask you, 5 years from now, do you expect sports prediction markets to be treated more like Wall Street products or more like sports books? And tell us why.
No, they'll be outlawed. Yeah, they're gone. Okay. We are in an era where Trump has a stranglehold on Congress. His stranglehold on the Supreme Court is loosening a little, as was seen by the tariffs decision, that even the Roberts Supreme Court won't do something that is so clearly against the Constitution. And when there's public outrage, like with the tariffs raising everybody's prices, the problem is what this Supreme Court has done is they're using what's called the shadow docket. So when the states rule that Trump is doing something illegal and unconstitutional, like sending federal troops into cities to enforce criminal laws, the judges hold hearings with lots of evidence. They issue temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions saying you can't do that. It's so clearly illegal. Goes up to the Court of Appeals after long hearings and such. The Court of Appeals says, of course, you can't send federal troops into American cities for crime enforcement. Then it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. And without briefs or arguments or even written opinions, often they simply reverse.
Yeah.
And the legal situation is, because those are all preliminary decisions, they're not binding precedent. So Kalshi and Polymarket, particularly Kalshi, is right now desperately trying to get some of the bans on their activities. Massachusetts and Nevada are probably the most important. And if they can get it to the Supreme Court, there is a pretty good chance that the Supreme Court will simply overturn it again, but on a temporary basis, allowing the Trump administration to do whatever it wants, which right now what it wants is to allow his family to be enriched by futures predictions bets with Kalshi and Polymarket. But once, and they will the Republicans in Congress will prevent any bill from passing the Senate
Sure.
through a filibuster. Then even if it passed, it goes to Trump, and he'll never sign a bill against his own financial interests. So there's no chance of the Congress doing anything. The states don't have any power except perhaps through taxation. But when the Supreme Court decides to hear the case, which it's possible might be sooner rather than later, since John Roberts does know gambling. He was a lawyer for the American Gaming Association once. And it's so clearly illegal. It so clearly was not the intent of Congress to legalize sports betting and call it commodities trading, except for Samuel Alito, who never votes against Trump, and Clarence Thomas, who never votes against him and is the most corrupt justice we've ever had on the Supreme Court. It could be a 7-2 if it actually got there. Could be even a 5-4 that, of course, you can't take bets on sports events and call them commodities trading.
Yeah.
If they instead use the shadow docket and simply reverse all the lower court opinions that have stopped Kalshi from operating, then we have to wait till Trump is gone. And there are I don't know. We never know what the Republicans are going to do. But if the Democrats take the presidency and Congress, they'll appoint more justices and it'll be over.
It'll be no longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know I think we're running out of time, but I want to put you on the spot kind of just for a minute. If you were to give one warning to regulators or lawmakers watching this all unfold, what would it be?
I think that the acts of Congress are important, although they probably won't pass and Trump will veto them. We are in an extremely dangerous times. It's not just sports betting. Somebody bet hundreds of millions of dollars on the price of oil going down and the stock market rising 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes before Trump announced that he was going to stop bombing.
It's wild.
Given the time, it was probably Trump himself, but certainly insiders in the White House, people who may have overheard it at Mar-a-Lago, or even in the Pentagon, are making decisions about life and death. War. It's literally a war, despite them not calling it a war, with thousands of people dying, and they have financial interests in it. So it could be just insider trading, or it could be, hey, let's talk about a manipulable outcome, announcing that bombing is going to stop 5 minutes after millions of dollars are bet on the stock market rising, means it could be actually creating the event, so that people who are betting on the event occurring are making hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is fascinating. I truly wish we could talk about this for another hour today, honestly.
Well, thank you.
A really good deep dive with one of the best. I really appreciate you talking to us today, and I'd like to talk to you further at some point after our podcast.
Absolutely.
You have anything else you want to add?
No, I as I said, I do a blog, which I also post on my site, gamblingandthelaw.com, all four words spelled out in full and run together. And I'm not involved in this. I'm a consultant, an expert witness for governments and industry, but I don't have any bets on it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Professor, thank you so much for being here today. We
You're
really appreciate it. It was great talking to you, and I'll see you soon. Okay.
terrific. Thanks, Virginia.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.